Okay, thank you very much, Anne. I'm actually going to start with the short, sharp shock treatment for everybody, but just one thing to keep in mind before we go any further down the road. About 80% of the British nationals who are living, probably also the same in Italy as in the rest of Europe, but it seems from all the surveys we've done, about 80% are actually people of working age with families. It's not the image which the press like to have of a lot of pensioners who've all retired for nice sunshine. That is not what we are, and that's not what we represent. What I'm going to do is actually perhaps frighten you all. I'm going to talk straight away about a no-deal scenario. I'm sure most people have been following what's going on in Westminster recently. All the signs are that we are heading for a no deal. The likelihood of May getting a vote early next year through Parliament diminish almost daily. And we are now in that countdown to the 29th of March. She has said very firmly she will neither withdraw Article 50 notice, nor will she allow a people's vote. The parliamentary arithmetic does not add up, and at the moment there isn't the parliamentary time left to get a people's vote in any event. So it looks as though we are heading straight for no deal. So that's what I'm going to deal with. Jeremy will go on and talk a bit more about the work that's being done in Europe, with Brussels, with Britain, with London, and also a bit about what we've been doing, because we have actually been working with the Italian politicians and government as well throughout this period. So he will talk a bit more about that. I'm only going to talk about no deal, essentially. Okay, so what is our situation? Our situation is essentially this. Up until the 29th of March, midnight, we all have all the rights as EU citizens to reside here, to work here, to drive a car, send your children to school, have health cover, etc. After the stroke of midnight on the 29th of March, every single one of you who is a British national and isn't of some other nationality or a dual national, becomes an illegal resident. You're not an illegal immigrant, you're not an alien, you're not any of those other things, you're not a refugee, you are quite simply an illegal resident. There isn't anybody else with this status. Nobody knows what the effect of it will be. It is simply a situation that has not been catered for before because it has never arisen. All right, if we start with residence. Residence is what underpins most of our rights. If you came into Italy as a national of a non-EU country, your rights are determined by the type of visa, work permit, etc. that you would be given. Equally, your rights now here are underpinned by your EU right to be resident here. So I'm only talking also about those who are legally resident. We know, and unfortunately there are people who have never bothered to register. In Italy, there has been the obligation to register for everybody, and if they haven't, I'm afraid that's a situation we are not here to deal with. That's for other people. We're only dealing with people who are here registered as legally resident. Some people say, oh, well, we will automatically become extracomunitari, third country nationals. There is no such status in law as a third country national. It's merely a description of where you come from and who you are. There are rights in EU law that appertain to that idea of third country national, but they are very specific and each one has to be applied for. So, for example, third country nationals have certain rights to apply for visas or work permits. There are procedures that the EU has also laid down, directives which govern these things in most European countries. But it is up to the individual countries, ultimately, as to how they decide to administer those. So again, we don't automatically become some mysterious sort of category of third country nationals. To get third country national status, if you like, if you're a resident, you would have to apply. So you have to apply for visas. You have to apply for work permits, and so on. If you've been here for more than 5 years and you have had a right under EU law, and many people have taken it up, but not everybody, you have a right to a long-term residence, a permit, which effectively, under the existing system for EU citizens, means that you become a permanent resident. And in Italy, that has been adopted into Italian law in exactly the same way, so you become a permanent resident. That is dependent on you being an EU resident, EU national. You won't be on the 30th of March. For those, the EU or the Commission has recently suggested, it's put out a paper, it was published I think on the 18th or the 13th of November. It's called Contingency Plans for a no-deal Brexit. And in it they suggest that we can all become third country national. We can have third country national status. They're only referring to one piece of EU legislation, which is the Third Country National Directive, dealing with long-term residents. So you have to have been here for 5 years to even begin to be considered if the countries within the EU agree to adopt it. And yet, as yet, nobody has. If we go on to some of the other things, just going back a point, the EU has not even considered what happens to people who have not been in a country for 5 years. And that includes a lot of people who have actually lived in Europe for maybe even 20, 30 years, but they have spent 4 years in this country, 3 years in another one, 2 years here, 1 year there. They have never been anywhere long enough to actually qualify for long-term residence. They haven't even been thought about. So again, we're back into the problem that there are a large number of people, we don't know the full number of British nationals in Italy, but it's anywhere from 50,000 up to possibly 60, 65,000 people. We're all in the same boat. Going on to some of the other things. Cars, car ownership, sounds a silly point. You can't actually own a car here unless you're resident. I haven't actually been able to find a law that says that, and nobody's been able to tell me which law says it. But you try and go and register a car in your name if you're not resident. It just doesn't happen. To my horror the other day, I discovered that actually, and I hadn't thought about this either, when I went to renew the insurance on my car, the guy said, oh, yes, okay, we can do that, but 29th of March, you're leaving the EU, you won't be legally resident here, will you? Your insurance won't be valid. 29th of March, midnight, don't go out celebrating. 30th of March, your car insurance is probably invalid and you'll be driving illegally. Healthcare. All our healthcare rights fall away too. Anybody who has got healthcare rights here because they are working, those will not be available to you because you are no longer legally resident as an EU citizen with the right to work. So until you can switch that status to some new status, you haven't got that right. If you're a pensioner here and you've been getting your health care paid under the S1 reciprocal arrangement agreement with Britain, that also falls away. Unless Italy has, or between now and 30th of March, a bilateral treaty or agreement with Britain that Britain will go on paying the healthcare of anyone with an S1 certificate, as they did before. What chance is there of Westminster negotiating with 27 different EU countries individually between now and the 30th of March? Almost none. As an illegal resident, you don't have any right, you don't even have any right to go to pronto soccorso unless it's an emergency, you've been in an accident, you're suffering from some contagious disease, or you're pregnant. So, for all the women, get pregnant, that's the only way out. You're protected.
It's like Sophia Loren, but yearly orgy denied.
It is, but it sounds strange, but it is actually those are the only kind of categories that get any automatic right to health, pronto soccorso to healthcare. Oh, sorry, I have to turn the page, I've gone the wrong way. Sorry about that. Some of the other things that, the right to run a business, the right to continue running your business, the right to employ people in your business, the right to be a self-employed person running your business. All of these rights are underpinned by you being legally resident as an EU citizen. There are no rights that are automatically replacing those until the government here in Italy and all the EU actually give us some rights. So I can keep going. Family reunion. You've had the right of family reunion. You've had the right to bring elderly relatives here or to go and visit them for a time and come back and so on. Children going to school or university in another country. Forget it. 30th of March, that has gone. Unless it's replaced by something else. At the moment, no one's replacing it. Pension, social security contributions. Lots of people have worked in different European countries, including in Britain. There is no mechanism in place to even suggest that you will be able to get not only your pension as it has been accumulated all over Europe, but let alone what will happen to your pension even if it is only coming from Britain. There is no guarantee that you'll get your pension uplift. That is something that the British have only done by bilateral negotiations with each individual country. So once we are outside of the European system where we get the uplift on the state pension, that falls away too, unless there is a bilateral agreement. And just before anybody thinks it's easy to have bilateral agreements, one, the EU, the Commission is saying to all the EU 27, do not start entering into bilateral negotiations for with you and individual countries in Britain. So they're turning their face against the idea to begin with, even if anybody else had the time to do it. The British don't have the time to even think about 27 separate bilateral agreements on everything. So we don't know. I mean, for example, on pension uplifts, in Australia, if you're a British pensioner, you don't get it. In America, if you're a British pensioner, you do. Purely depends on what the agreement is. We will have it no longer. We don't know whether, in fact, there will be any aggregation of the contributions people have made throughout their working lives in different countries. There's no mechanism in place for that to be applied to British people who've worked in different countries. Recognition of qualifications. Again, another words. And in the same paper, they have actually said to the various EU 27 countries, we don't want you to start bilateral negotiations to sort these out. The only thing I can say before sitting down is that in what we've been trying to do and campaigning to try and do is to want to get the Italian government to start legislating and putting forward something that protects us, gives us something, even if we have a little time to sort it out long term, but they need to have something in place for the 30th of March. We're pushing very hard for them to do what France and Germany have already done. France and Germany have agreed, I'm
talking about this.
Passed legislation to say that they will give us or give them, those in France and Germany, all those rights they would have had under the withdrawal agreement. So it's a huge protection. We haven't got it. So here in Italy, there is a very crude Australian expression, I'm not sure if I can use it. I will, okay. It's, I'm Australian born, so I think I can get away with it. We're literally up shit creek without a paddle.